Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into another edition of Infection Podcast. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig and check out our website, infectionpodcast.com. Joining me, as always, Brian with an eye, Aldridge. What's going on, buddy?
Not too much. If you want to find me, you can find me at Boise Computer on X, or of course at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, True Social, and wherever else is still alive and kicking.
Alex Jones is back on Twitter. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think
people spoke.
And I know people are, there's plenty of, I don't know if people are frustrated about it. You know, the majority of people said yes. What, 70% of the people said that they wanted
like
back on
2.5 million votes on the poll or something, yeah.
And I think that a lot of it is a small little minority of people that create a lot of noise are the ones that make everybody else think. Because what's the news report on? They go and say, oh, like nobody wants Alex Jones on the platform.
I want him on the platform.
Well, if you go and talk to real people actually want to be able to hear from people that you don't think I should be able to hear. It's amazing how they try to limit what you have access to hear. So, because I'd rather have all opinions, whether I agree with them or not, so I have the ability to make a balanced decision on my own. And that's I think what they want.
Tell me why you would not want this on your platform. I mean, this is just objectively funny. That's just objectively funny. This was his last tweet before his account was shut off, by the way.
Yeah, and that's kind of the crazy thing is also, they did that 1 point something $billion. How many billion was it for this judgment against him?
It's like a gazillion dollars or something. It's some unconscionable amount of money.
And
it's
so
like
then they said, well, all right, we're willing to settle with him for whatever billion. And I don't get that whole case as far as what were the circumstances. He should be able to say his opinion on whatever, and they're saying that he did more than that.
Which, yeah, of course, yeah.
What's the news do? They sit there and they'll lie and they'll try to affect people's opinions by whatever means necessary. For him, I can't go into his mind and know if he truly believed it or not. But if he believed it, doesn't he have the right to actually say it?
Well, I don't want to get canceled, so I won't delve into.
I'm not saying what he got the right to say, but you know what I'm saying. Like, shouldn't people have the right to say their opinion even if you don't agree with it? That's kind of what
Brian, you're
down.
treading into dangerous territory. So at Real Alex Jones,
especially
and
on YouTube.
Yes, and at InfoWars is also back on Twitter as well. So the official InfoWars account with its 376,000 followers. And how many does Alex have? He's got 1.6 million followers, which is insane on X. So he's back there. Nevertheless, Brian, we have got a show for the people tonight. A game that we had talked about, I wouldn't say in great detail. It's a game that we covered, a game that we have talked about on and off for, I'd say, the last at least 4 to 5 years. A game by the name of The Day Before was officially released this past week after this was the company that folks remember had the copyright infringement levied against them because of a calendar app in the UK. That caused some delays. The game released about 4 days ago, and I saw on Twitter this afternoon as I was doing my typical trolling of the interwebs that 4 days after release, the company and the studio behind the game is closing down, which I believe this has to be the fastest that a company has ever closed after releasing a product, right? I don't know that this has ever happened before.
Yeah, I mean, this was pretty fast because
4 days. 4 days?
Yeah, they'll usually there'll be a little bit of back and
96 hours?
forth and them trying to fix the problems. One thing that I saw is one of the devs pretty much said we miscalculated our capabilities, which I can totally understand. Going into, I don't know, you probably remember, but I did game development for a while. And had a concept for a game that I was really interested in doing. And you know what I realized? It would be a lot of work, and it would take a very large team that was very capable to push something like that to fruition, right? And so I made the decision that if I wasn't going to do it right, I wasn't going to do it at that time. And here, these guys, similar kind of a concept. They're people that started making a game, and I think they've realized to make the type of game that they promise people is very difficult. They promised an MMO, and from what I understand, this is an extraction shooter.
Correct.
It is not an MMO. And an extraction shooter is much easier to make. There's a lot less code and a lot less things that you have to tackle and figure out. They can't continue. According to them, they said they failed financially and they can't afford to continue working on it. And if they're not going, I think they were hoping for the big boom of people buying it that would then make it so that they can continue development. But if they didn't get that initial shot of people, then they won't have enough to develop this, and that's where they're at. So it's kind of a mix of a couple games. If you look, what is it? What was it? Kartov? Is that what it was called?
A little bit of Tarkov, a little bit of Tom
Tarkov.
Clancy.
It's got the Division. Yeah, they definitely took some of those elements as far as how it looks, and a lot of people kind of called them out for stealing concepts, I think, from other games.
Which I don't have a problem
trailers.
with.
No, but this, I think they did the best they could, probably for the team that they had and for the experience that they had making this. I mean, it takes a lot of work to make what they did make, but people expect something highly different, when it comes to purchasing a game and playing it long term. And I don't think these guys have the ability to keep up with the number of fixes and changes it would take to get this thing playable in a quick amount of time to make people not just leave it behind, because they're going to leave it behind if they don't hurry.
Well, Brian, and this comes back to something that I have talked about a lot. It's a phrase that you've heard me say a lot on this show. I not only use it on this show, I use it on my morning show in regards to politics. Managing expectations. And when you announce that you are making the game of all games, by the way, what we were just showing was the trailer for the, this is the most recent trailer that came out in November, but I have another trailer here, which is the trailer that they showed. That's not the right one. Which one am I looking for? The announcement trailer. This one came out about 3 years ago, and I want to play a little bit of the audio and just go through a little bit of this one because, again, a game of this magnitude, which, as you noted, was a massive online shooter MMO, and I don't have the clips, and unfortunately I didn't have the time to go find our old shows to pull them, which I do enjoy doing from time to time. You made the comments when we first looked at these announcement trailers that this was not going to be feasible from not only a development standpoint, but from a technical standpoint. Now, the tech has caught up with the new Unreal Engine. I think a lot of that is more possible now than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Definitely more doable now than what they originally, the engine that they started on when this was being shown.
Correct. So let's it's a 5-minute trail. I'm going to play a little bit of it. We'll listen to some audio, and then we'll dip in and out and talk a little bit about it. So here was the day before trail. This came out January of 2021, so it'll be about 3 years next month. Let's take a listen.
Welcome to the short gameplay demonstration trailer for The Day Before, an upcoming open-world multiplayer survival game. The Day Before features a huge, stunningly detailed post-apocalyptic world destroyed by a terrible virus.
I'm running out of fuel.
Great, man. Awesome.
We'll look around here, I guess.
Shall we split up?
Yep.
I'll find out what's in the skyscraper.
Okay, and I'll look around here. Let's see what we have here. All right. I have found a great cowboy hat. Tell her everything's all right. And there aren't any more guns in the valley.
Easy, cowboy.
Listen up. This is Woodbury Survivor Colony speaking. If you can hear this message, it means that we have opened our doors for new survivors. We can give you food and shelter and ensure your safety. Here are the coordinates.
Did you hear that?
Yep, I got a message too.
Great. Maybe I can sell my junk there and get myself a better rifle.
Let's find some fuel and go.
In the Survivor Colony, you can sell and buy any items, as well as cooperate with other players.
All right, so let's pause it right there, what we've seen so far. So it's an open world survival game. It seemed like it was a little bit more of an instanced thing where you would play with a small party, in this case, 2 or 3 guys running through a city, and then you'd go back to this survival colony where the MMO side of it was taking place. It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, and there's a lot. I mean, to get it to where you can have, well, first of all, how many people do you want to have in a little colony? If you're having the MMO be a small room, how does that work?
It's like a trading post, essentially.
If you want to go be able to find your friend, let's say thousands of people are playing this game, which maybe they're not now, but let's say in a situation where there are thousands of people playing, who do you decide to show to whom in that instance? One thing that, what was that game you had mentioned at the beginning? The Division. What they did is you would kind of phase in and out and see certain people, and there wasn't a guarantee that you'd see the person, but they kind of phased it so that you'd see people around you, but you wouldn't see everybody. Those are the kind of things that you have to figure out how to code in. How do you determine who you see? Is it based on ping? You take the top people with ping and you allow them to be in an instance with you, because this is kind of like that No Man's Sky issue they ran into. Remember when they said, "Oh, you'll be able to see all these people." Oh yeah, look, their numbers have gone to
1,000, 1,300.
I mean, it's about as close to zero as you can get.
Yeah, 1,300.
Yeah, I mean, it's right down there. Remember in No Man's Sky when they were saying, I think it was No Man's Sky, where they were saying, that, you'd be able to, in this huge universe, see other people. Like if you were in the same place, you'd see them, and that ended up not being true because it's a very difficult thing to do properly. That I figured they probably could figure out, but that's not an MMO. Just because a lobby doesn't make something an MMO, because that's really what that is a visual lobby. You're seeing people in the lobby. But I think people, when they heard MMO, they're assuming I'm going to be able to run around and hunt people. I'm going to be able to do all these things, and kind of like what these other games that we've played in the past is. No, it ended up being an extraction shooter, and I don't think people wanted an extraction shooter, even though it kind of hinted at it in that original video. Like you said, it's more like you're doing something with a couple of players. You're not running around a map with thousands of other people, and you're possibly running into them.
Exactly.
It's definitely instanced, and I don't think the people realized that it was going to be instanced.
Well, and it's the only way you can do it. I mean, you couldn't possibly have what you're describing as a full, complete, wide open world shooter with thousands of. It's just not practical. I mean, for not even from a technological standpoint, but just from a general playability standpoint, who would want to play that? It just doesn't work.
And things get, when you have a mass MMO style. I mean, just remember how it was in these other games where you'd be waiting for the loot to respawn.
Sure.
When you have a situation like this, that's something we ran into in H1Z1. Is if someone ran through before you, or even in Miscreated, when someone ran through before you, there is no loot to get, and it dramatically affects your player experience, because you could be running from house to house to house to house and not see a single thing. If they're trying to create kind of a single player or a co-op style environment, you need to make sure that there's loot to have that level feel how it's supposed to feel, and that's not what you do in an MMO. So I think that this needed to be, if that's what they're wanting to do, is kind of create something that has unique, taking you through levels, then it needs to be how they ended up doing it. But you got to be super clear in your promise of, this is an extraction shooter with a common lobby. And look at all those zombies. I mean, that's the thing. If you look at all the zombies we see on the screen there, that doesn't work in an MMO. One thing that triggered to me that this was not going to be what people were expecting was when they showed the deformation of the snow and mud. Actually, it was mud. Remember them driving through that one place and there was all the mud on the ground, and it was leaving all the giant tracks from the vehicle driving through the mud.
Yeah.
All that stuff in a multiplayer environment is insane. It's just, you're sending then tons of data just to show where the vehicle drove that would need to be highly optimized. And it would need someone who has a lot of experience and ability to program that to be something that would work. I'm sure, Grand Theft Auto in multiplayer, these developers that have done that sort of thing in a very well-known game that has a lot of experience doing that could probably code it and make it work. But not a small team. I mean, how much time are they going to waste trying to make something like that work? It worked in a demo with 5 people, but it's not going to work with 100 to 200 people on a map.
Well, and see, and that's what this comes down to. You've got a small team. I don't know the size, but a small team of developers working on a very complex game, and they have realized it's not practical. It's not realistic, and that's why in a post that they put out on X today, it says this is the statement. I'll read it directly from them. The teams, the developers team is fantastic. FNTASTIC. Fantastic. That's the pronunciation of it. And this is what it reads. Today we announced the closure of Fantastic Studio. Unfortunately, the day before has failed financially, and we lack the funds to continue. All income received is being used to pay off debts and our partners, in all likelihood meaning that they were highly leveraged to even get this thing out the door. We invested all of our efforts, resources, and man hours into the development of the day before, which was our first huge game. We really wanted to release new patches to reveal the full potential of the game, but unfortunately we don't have the funding to continue work. It is important to note that we didn't take any money from the public. Now, this is important, Brian, that we didn't take any money from the public during development of the day before. There was no pre-orders or crowdfunding campaigns. We worked tirelessly for 5 years, pouring our blood, sweat, and tears into the game. At the moment, the future of the day before and Prop Night, which is their multiplayer mode, is unknown, but servers will remain operational. We apologize if we didn't meet your expectations. We did everything within our power, but unfortunately, we miscalculated our capabilities. Creating games is an incredibly challenging endeavor. Couple things to take away from there. The first is that they didn't crowdfund and they didn't take pre-orders, and there's something to be said for this. And I think there's two things you take away from it, Brian. The first is, why do so many studios crowdfund and take pre-orders? Because it's too damn expensive to develop a game without any revenue flowing in during the process. And that's really what it comes down to, is you can't develop a product for 5 years without either borrowing a gazillion dollars to do it, or without having such a small team that you can't ever get it done. So that's a problem. That's why you see crowdfunding, and that's why it's such a popular method. Now, I'm not justifying crowdfunding or saying it's the only way to build a game, because it's not. But this is an example of where when you don't have any cash flow, you don't have any revenue coming in, it makes it impossible to do this. So again, props to them for not doing the crowdfunding. But I think ultimately it probably led to the demise of the game, which, you congratulate them on one hand. On the other hand, you say, well, that's stupid. Now you put 5 years into a game, and this unfinished, unpolished product is going to be your legacy, right? That sucks. Yeah. And then the last part of it, creating games is an incredibly challenging endeavor. We miscalculated our capabilities. It's a lot more work than it might seem like on face value.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to, is I think a lot of people, because that's something I looked at as I was doing this whole process, was what would it take to get what I envision out there in the way that I envision it? And just getting a group of people together to do that, it's almost impossible, because you need to have people, the people that have the talent to be able to push this through want to be paid. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. If you have the talent to make a game in this way, you want to be paid to do it. How this company they have a list of those games that they showed on there that they also put out. Prop night, the what something 8. What was the list? They had a little list of games that they put out.
The Wild 8, Dead with Wild 8 was the
Wild 8.
Cowboy game. The Dead Dozen, the Radiant one, Prop Night, and then the day before. That's
so they had some sort of funding probably coming from those, because Wild 8 I think actually did sell some.
2017 though, Brian. I mean, that money's
but
gone.
that may have been what made them think that they could do this, right? That they put out a couple of games, but this whole survival genre group is pretty finicky. I mean, we played with a lot of them for years, and they want everything done very specifically, and they want what they want. It's not like a game where you kind of deliver them something that you envision, and they're like, "Oh, this is cool." They want all these. They have a list of features they already want in their head. So these guys tried to deliver that list of features of here's what this kind of game was supposed to be, and as they said, it's more difficult than they thought it would be. It required more talent than what they had on staff.
In all likelihood, that was because of revenue.
A couple million in, they might be able to. Yeah,
well, I'm sure
if they pumped a couple million of the company, they'd be able to get this thing out and everything fixed. Hire the right people.
Well, and I'm sure that they did. I mean, you can't employ people, even a studio of 10 people, Brian, which is small. You are pumping
These guys
millions
have
of dollars.
51 to 200 is what it says, I think, on LinkedIn.
Okay, I don't know how. I call BS. There's no way they have anywhere over. They might have like 55 employees. You are talking
with different people doing random
If
things.
you have 55 employees, your expenses are millions of dollars a year. You cannot do payroll, benefits, all of the things that are required to operate a business without millions of dollars a year. And you say millions, Nick, that's a lot of money. Well, not when you're paying out
not when hiring
55 people's
yeah.
salary at, I don't know what the average game dev salary is, but assume the average is close to 6 figures, or somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, you do.
I mean, it should be upper, 70, 80. Depends where you live, really. I mean, you could have it'd be a lower, 100,000, or it could be approaching $100,000 for your salary would be something that people would be willing to work for. Because how are you going to live in today's economy on much less than that?
Well, let's lowball it at 75 times 55 employees. Your payroll is $4.1 million a year. That's just your payroll.
Yep.
That doesn't include your payroll taxes. That doesn't include your benefits. That doesn't include any of your other expenditures to build a game, engines, licensing. You're talking about a company that you're spending millions upon millions of dollars a year to operate. So yes, their debts are, I'm sure, incredibly high, and I'm sure some of these guys, excuse me, probably have a lot of their own personal stuff on the line here, which is unfortunate. That's small business, which is what they were.
Well, Donnie says, I didn't buy this game, but I don't understand. If they wanted to release a scam game, why not just do another generic sandbox with nothing to it? This game had a somewhat elaborate trader and escape system for an early access title. And I think they tried. That's the thing, is I don't think they intended going into this that it would be a scam.
No, I don't think so.
I think they had a checklist of here's what we want this game to have, and they promised that at the beginning. Because in concept it kind of works. I mean, in theory it all works. With our little test group it all works. But once you really dig in and start implementing it, that's when you realize it doesn't work, well. And I think that's what it came down to. Is I think they ended up pushing out everything they could as far as features, and there's things that they had to drop because it just wasn't feasible. Now, is this actual gameplay? Which one is this?
This is actual gameplay from some guy on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is somebody playing, and this is I saw somebody else posting an image, and there was ghost players. Players that maybe when they died, it switches their model out, and it left the old model there standing in a crouched position. That you couldn't interact with. You could see that their AI. Tracing here is just
can't get hit on a couch or on a standing object by the looks of it. Yeah,
they don't. Yeah, their models, their volumes aren't shaped in a way where it's easy for a player to jump onto a table, which it should be. they've gone. There's just a lot of stuff that it takes time and a lot of effort to go through and clean up, so that as those creatures are running around, they don't catch up on little snags in the models, physics and things like that. It's just, there's a lot of work, and if you have a small team, you just don't have time to do it all. You need to have large teams that you have a small group that they go through and fix all that stuff, so that your people that are doing other work don't get distracted on it. And so they had to make the decision: do we push out features, or do we fix all the little details? And they wanted to push out features, I'm sure.
So now I want to turn to something else, and we can sit here for the next 2 hours, Brian, and lament over this, that, and the other. But let's talk about. So you've got a game now that has been out 96 hours, and the studio is closing. So you're not going to get any new updates on the game at all. The reviews on Steam are atrocious, overwhelmingly negative. It has 17% positive reviews. Now, I assume a lot of that is coming in now from the fact that you just spent, I think it's $39. I'm not logged into Steam because it's in the web browser, but I believe it's $39 for the game US, and you will presumably never get another update unless somebody comes in, buys the studio, and decides that they want to fix it.
That's
a
big.
But
yeah, that'd be a very big undertaking.
So
here's my. They want to come in and pick up your mess rather than start from scratch.
But here's my question to you, and this is what I don't understand from a business standpoint. And I know you don't have the answer, but I want to pose it to you. Obviously, they knew they were going to shut down before they even launched the game. So you've got, and they needed to get the game out. Okay, I'm all over the place on this. They knew they were out of money and they were going to have to shut down before the game even launched.
Well, maybe they expected if there was a boom, they wouldn't have to.
But it's only been 4 days. You can't release a game 2 weeks before Christmas and be pissed off that a whole bunch of people and I assume Brian, it had 30. It's top. It had 38,000 players 4 days ago.
But yeah, it was I think the most wish-listed game on Steam for a while.
So, I don't know how many. It's hard to tell how many units they moved. Steam stats are a little iffy with that. One player tracker estimates 52,000 owners. A couple of others say 300,000 to 500,000. Steam Spy says 3.5 million, which there's no way. But you knew you were going to release this game. You knew you were going to go out of business, and that brings forward an interesting thing. Did they push this game out trying to recoup any costs possible to try and pay off their debts? Which, if that's the case, it's shady and scummy, and I would argue even borderline illegal to release a non-finished product knowing that it's not going to be finished. Donnie says Steam is offering refunds for everybody for this game, so if that's the case, then no, they're not going to get any of this money because everybody's going to do a refund. If you're out of Brian, why not just hold on for 2 or 3 months? And I know that sounds easier said than done, maybe because I'm not in that position. But how can you release a game, close the studio 96 hours later, and expect to recoup any costs long term? You didn't even give the game a fighting chance. Just don't even release it. Because now you've just tarnished the game. There's no chance of any rebound at all. It's over. 5 years of development is flushed down the toilet. Liquidate, sell the game to somebody else before you release it. Do something.
This is where you work for an investor. Like you work to get an investor who says, hey, we put out something, if we could just work on polishing this, there's a chance that it could be popular. Somebody might be willing to throw down some investment money and says, if you give me, a percentage of everything you end up making, I'll throw down that money to do this. And maybe they did look for that and didn't find it, or maybe they just are done. Like they wanted to put out what they said they would, and now they're done with it and they don't want to. I don't know what their real thinking is. I think that they did put out a thing saying, don't call us asset flip and all this. I don't think that they're necessarily an asset flip. I just think that there's just a lot of work. It's too much. It was too much work to do an MMO, which is what they should have come out of the gate with a realistic. And that's just inexperience. I think that really brought that to fruition. Is inexperience made them think that they could make an MMO of this size with all these features in a reasonable amount of time with the limited amount of money and development staff.
Yeah, and they're not shying away from the whole refund thing. I mean, they retweeted something on their X account 47 minutes ago talking about Steam opening up refunds for any players who want it. So they're not going to make any money on this. I mean, vast majority of the purchases, obviously there will be people that hold on to it, but a vast majority of the purchases will be refunded in the coming weeks. These guys are not going to get any money out of this at all, and you're going to have an already unfinished, stale, broken, dead game on Steam. I'm failing to grasp what the plan was here. They knew this was coming, Brian. I mean, it's not like they woke up 7 days ago before the release and said, this thing's going to release. It's going to be, look at Conan Exiles, for example. You had a studio that was on the brink of bankruptcy in Funcom, and they released the game. It was a brutal launch, a terrible launch for Conan Exiles. And what did they do? They rebounded, and now obviously Funcom had cash rolling in from other properties, a little bit different, but this was a company on the brink. They held it out. The game ended up being incredibly successful and popular. Oh, there's my cat. And then it ended up saving the studio long term. So if you're not going to give it a shot, I will. And Brian, you were in this field a little bit. If you weren't going to give it a shot, why would you even release it? Why not try and get somebody else to take over this if this is your baby, the thing you've poured blood, sweat, and tears into? Why would you do this?
Yeah, and one thing, you kind of say, well, why wouldn't they like make it open source or make it a public project that people could come in? I think the main thing with that I'm probably seeing is there are probably some assets that they purchased that limit them license-wise from just saying this is open source, because you can't change the license of a product that you purchased and hand it down. So let's say some of the guns that are in here that maybe they didn't make from scratch, that look like a real world weapon, so they purchased an asset that has those guns.
Sure.
They'd have to go in and either pull all those out. It takes some work to get this to where they could figure out what legally do they have the license to do, as far as what did they create? Because I don't think they created everything from scratch in this game. I really, really doubt it. Otherwise, they could hand this off and say, other people work on this game, make it a public, thing where you can create a team that just want it for fun, start building a game and polishing this thing as an open source project in a way, or, some sort of a license. But I just don't think that, that's kind of the downside of the way that marketplaces and things work with Unreal Engine. If you go purchase any of those, you can't just say, I'm giving all these assets away to you, because you own them. The person who's then going to be taking the project over doesn't. So they're kind of in a stuck place where they can't just hand this off to somebody else unless they sell all those legal rights to the products that are included in it.
But let's move. Okay, because open source is, I agree. The open source is not practical, but just in general,
or handing off the project in general, they could do that. That would be
sell
something, because then they'd be able to say, these licenses that I have under my name, I'm selling to you, and you are now the owner of these licenses. I will have no more legal obligation to them. That's what it comes down to. Or rebuy those, because that'd be cheap in the grand scheme of things. Go and rebuy those assets under a new name and then continue developing somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be that difficult to do. And so I'm surprised, that someone wouldn't want to maybe come pick this up, because it's not horrible. There's a lot of work that went into this. You get something
5 years
to this
of
stage
serious
of
work.
To get something to this stage of development takes a lot of work. It's not polished, but there's a lot of work that's been put into it. And it's not something you're going to do in 6 months to a year to get something that has all of this. In the amount of level design they did, I would be happy if somebody turned around and said, let's finish this game.
But now they can't.
I think this genre has kind of passed a little bit. But I think part of the other issue is this genre has kind of passed a little bit too. I mean, this isn't what's hot right now.
You're correct. I think that's part of it. But the other part of it now is now you've got a tarnished brand. Now, Donnie is talking about No Man's Sky. And now that is a game that has, seemingly everybody besides me, the game has reimagined and reinvented itself.
Oh, yeah.
But
they were in the exact same situation day one, right? Everybody was trashing on what they released. I mean, we were right there, trashing on what they was released. It was nothing like the concept. The AI was trash, but they turned around. Somehow they had money. They continued to have money, and they just kept pumping out the features, pumping out the fixes, and now it's an unrecognizable from the game that was released day one, and it's got a ton of features and it's polished.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a game
got a player base
that's got about 10,000 people playing it on average, and it's got a much bigger console audience. I'll note this game is a perfect console game, unlike other games like.
And it's
Star
on,
Citizen.
I think, the Game Pass, right?
It is on the Game Pass as well, exactly.
So.
But I will say the difference between this and No Man's Sky is that No Man's Sky, yes. Now, first of all, that game was way more popular. I mean, this guy was on Stephen Colbert promoting his game. It was on consoles at launch. I mean, it was a little bit of a different situation, but they stuck with it. And,
Donnie points out they may be filing for bankruptcy, right? I mean, if it could be that he says, probably meeting a contract to avoid certain personal liabilities they release to meet the terms and don't care about the money because of bankruptcy. So,
okay, that
way they
that's
can't
the
be
most
sued,
logical thing.
because if they release something and someone said, and somehow there were people who put out money or invested something, you say we released, we put out the product, it wasn't well received, and so we cut our losses.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes through bankruptcy court. I know the courts don't look very highly upon releasing a subpar product to meet your investors' terms and then shutting your doors. Now, I didn't think about that in terms of bankruptcy. That's probably the most practical explanation.
Yeah.
But Brian, it does a couple of things here, and we can move on whenever you're ready. It is another example of why people have video game PTSD from buying games and getting excited about games, because they are constantly misled, they are constantly let down, and they're constantly frustrated. And unfortunately we do it a lot to ourselves, but you're a hamster on a wheel with that. Secondly, I think this is another big shot against early access, and why people are
tarnishes that concept.
It does. Now, I do think that there is some legitimacy to the crowdfunding model. The reason you do pre-orders and the reason you do those things is so that you can have cash on hand, so that you can continue the development of the game. I think that might be a note to take away from this as a kind of a learning experience, perhaps. But I guess this is it. The game is out within 4 days. The game is out, and the game is essentially done, all within a 96-hour period of time, which I will note is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it comes down to now that the expectations of people has changed a lot in the past 5 years as far as what we expect a game to look like. These simple, very crude games, people just don't want them anymore. And to make these games, we get so many games from these AAA studios. That takes thousands of people to make. Thousands. I mean, if you just look at the staff that's making, GTA 6 is going to raise the bar again, right? They did with Red Dead Redemption, and that everybody's always kind of chasing that kind of a polish.
Sure.
But the expectation of what we want to see now, people don't put up with the same bugs that they did, 5, 7 years ago, 10 years ago. It's hard to have a small studio put out a game because if it's not what everybody expects, they'll move on to the next. There's tons of games coming out, and people aren't going to put up with the game if it's not what they want. And so, there's not these little projects coming out as much, and maybe in certain genres, but in this genre, and people now have an expectation of having it look seamless, voice acting, AI, and NPC animations, everything perfect and just works how It's got to be at least what we saw in The Division. That's hard to do. That took a big studio to get there. But I think that was their expectation because of the demos that they put out. They put out little demos that looked like that. Well, they didn't have a big enough team to make a whole game like that. You can make 5 minutes look like that, but you can't make the whole experience look like that. And when people then see the game, they're like, well, okay, this isn't like that. Well, yeah, they can make 5 minutes. They can't make hours and hours and hours of gameplay look like that.
Brian, I don't know that I don't need every game to be Red Dead Redemption. I don't need every game to be GTA 6. I just need a product.
Put in a tight budget, though. People are conserving their money right now.
Well, they are. But what my point is that I don't need, and I will use a great example. And it's a long time ago. I don't know how well the game would be received now, but I always go back to Firewatch. This was a game that was $30. I think it was either $29 or $19.99, one or the other, $20 or $30. And the story was only about 2 hours. And that was if you played it kind of slow. It was not a very long game. It is still one of the best gameplay experiences and one of the most fun I have ever had playing a video game. And it was small. It was short. It didn't need to be 70 billion hours worth. You know, Brian, all of these games I have, freaking Fallout, this other stupid game that I spent $400 on a video card for to play. I paid 2.5 hours of it. Starfield. Yeah. All of these games, I never have the time to play any of them. I'm okay if you give me a 6-hour campaign that I can play over the span of 2 months because my time is so stretched and limited. I don't need everything to be the MMORPG, the greatest open world survival peer-to-peer game that has ever existed. Just give me a fun product. Yeah. It doesn't need to be that. That's them. That's not me.
The polished, yeah. Well, that's the thing is...
But it doesn't even have to be the most polished thing, Brian. Give me fun gameplay. Give me something I can enjoy
Firewatch
playing.
Graphics wasn't crazy, right? It was very blocky, but the thing is they polished story, they polished the experience to where it just kind of flowed. The whole story from beginning to end, for me, as I played it, felt like it flowed. And I think that's the difference.
It's 4 freaking hours. That's the whole game. 4 hours.
But I think if this company would have tried to polish a limited experience, that it would have been much more well received. I think the problem is their original vision was this big, and then as they went, they realized the vision needed to be this big. But look at all the time they wasted working on this vision that then tailored itself down through experience and headaches and battles to get down to this. If they realized going into it that this was going to be the experience and this was going to be the size of the game they needed to make, and they focused on that, they could have been successful. But I think they didn't realize what they were getting into, and they thought it needed to be this. And that's not what people want if it's not right.
Well, and that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make. This is something that the developers feel that they need to do. They want to compete with the Rockstars. They want to compete with the Bethesdas. It's completely. I mean, Rockstar for GTA 6 they have thousands of people working on that game, and that is not an understatement. Thousands of individuals, and it still takes them 12.5 years and costs them billions of dollars when it's all said and done to make.
Yep.
You don't have to be that. Give me the one shot 6, 7, 8 hour campaign that I can enjoy for $19 or $20, Brian, or $30, and then let me go. Damn, Brian, guess what I did this weekend? I played this game. I beat the story on a Saturday afternoon, and it was fantastic. That's exactly what Firewatch did, and it caused I mean, the Firewatch is available on everything now. Now, I'll note I haven't played it since 2016 when it came out, but I still have fond memories of it.
Yeah,
and I think if I load it up and maybe I'll buy it on the Switch and play for Christmas, since I haven't touched my Switch since last year. Last time I traveled. I I don't get it. I don't understand this idea that everything has to be the largest. Everybody's trying to be WoW. Everybody's trying to be Red Dead. Everybody's trying to be Fallout or GTA, and it's stupid. It's completely stupid.
Look back at Zera. Remember Zera?
Zero Survival.
So Joshua, he was developing that on his own, just doing Twitch streams, working on Zera. And for that, one thing that he did right was he had realistic expectations of what he was making and delivering. He created a certain size map. He stuck to all those things and just worked on implementing various features into it. But, you know, he's mixed reviews, but he kept his expectations, I think, realistic. He didn't overpromise to people what they were going to get. And, you know, he's had some success with the game. And so I think that is where, if they would have come in and to where he created all the base of it just to show that it was possible. And then he brought people in to polish it. And I think that that's what this company should have done. Create your concept that worked. It may not look pretty, but works, and then polish it. The problem is they didn't have a working concept. You know, they didn't have something that worked in with all the features that they promised. Get something that has basic features that maybe don't look perfect or work exactly how you want them to, just to show that it can be done, and then go through and make it look pretty and make it look how people expect it to look.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, that he's an example of because, you know, I'd sit there and talk to him when he was on Twitch streaming, working on various features, and he was just making stuff work, you know, one thing at a time, going through the list and doing it. And he didn't go public with it until he had implemented all those features. You know, that's what it came down to.
That's exactly what it comes down to. So that's the unfortunate start, and all in 1 week of all within 1 week of actually 6 days since we did the show on Tuesday. The game is released and is effectively being shut down. Pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see if we hear any more news after this. I mean, it may be that they're totally shutting down, and you know, someone will write up an update on how the bankruptcy or whatever it is going. But you know, it is kind of sad, and this is the state of kind of the gaming industry. I mean, this is a tough time. We've covered week after week the number of shutdowns of studios, the number of layoffs. People are trying to make. You know, you just did a quick summary of what it costs to hire a certain number of people, you know, millions of dollars per year. You know, that's what the number of people buying video games when the cost of food is doubled to almost quadrupled on a lot of items. People are making that decision, and they're not spending it on, you know, a risky game that may not make it to development or, you know, make it to total fruition. You know, they don't want to get into an early access game when they're worried about making their mortgage payments or making, you know, can I afford health insurance and all this? I think that's what it really comes down to. I think it's just kind of bad timing.
It is. Before we move on, Donnie's got a couple more comments. He says the game focused too much on making things purty, and that's the sole reason it was the most wishlisted game in Steam history. Gaming fans don't care about the substance, and they act shocked when something is pretty but doesn't work perfectly. And I also put some of the blame, and I've said this before, on the users for this, because they have these first of all, they read up between the lines way too much, and they have unrealistic expectations. That's a huge problem. And then Donnie finishes, just want to say something. I love this show and miss you guys doing in-depth game breakdowns of situations like this for specific games. Donnie, when they arise, I think we'll continue to do them. It's just been there's really not been a whole. This genre is the survival genre, which takes us back to our roots. It's kind of come and gone, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of them out there. When's the last time you've really heard any major announcements from Miscreated, for example? Rust is out there. One thing I did want to say.
What you got?
So the DayZ Rust teams trolled. They put something out, you know, saying we're celebrating our what is this? Let me read this really quick. So they put out a statement. Where
this
is
really scummy.
Yeah, today I want to primarily celebrate for no reason at all the remarkable 10th anniversary of DayZ. is with immense gratitude we commemorate a decade of passion, creativity, and unwavering support of our incredible community. In this milestone moment, we are delighted to announce the thriving success of DayZ, our groundbreaking MMO experience that has captivated audiences worldwide. This open-world survival masterpiece, enriched with years of dedication, has truly flourished into a gaming marvel. Throughout the years, we poured boundless effort, resources, and man-hours into the development of DayZ. From the immersive open-world design to the adrenaline-pumping survival elements, every aspect has been meticulously crafted to provide an unparalleled gaming experience. The journey began in 2013 with the release of early access of DayZ, followed by the release of 1.0 update in 2018, and the subsequent release of Livona DLC in 2019. We express our deepest gratitude to the amazing community that has been with us every step of the way. Your unwavering support has made this incredible journey possible, and we look forward to many more years of adventures, exploration, and camaraderie in the expansive world of DayZ. Thank you for being a part of the extraordinary adventure for over the 10 years. And they do a similar breakdown of the years that the other company did with their releases, saying 2012 start of development, 2013 release of early access, including Melee, 2018 release of 1.0, including Vaulting, 2019 release of Livonia DLC, 2023, 10 years later, and still undefeated. And they crossed out Dead Game and put DayZ Team.
Why would you do that?
I mean, these are people that, for them, I mean, if you look at DayZ, they had a whole backbone of a game. You know, Donnie knows a lot about this. I mean, they were backboned on another game's engine and kind of just put features on top of it. They weren't their own standalone game for a long, long time. And they had a lot of problems. I mean, I remember covering DayZ's problems back in the day, especially when they released that
freaking
standalone
disaster.
client. It was a disaster. You know, and how they've maintained to do their, I don't know how they maintain to keep their funding. I mean, I remember watching things, you know, them talking about development and things. They're not a perfect example. I mean, most of the things that they say in here is not true. I'd say Rust is much more successful than these guys are.
Oh God, yeah, it's not even close. Now DayZ does have a super big player base now. It is,
but it took them. You know, they had huge issues back in the day with player numbers.
Well, Donnie says DayZ launched with no throwable grenades, broken vehicles, a generic base building system, and countless features not in the game, like vaulting and jumping. That was not early access. Full release. Their fans rewarded the game with mostly positive reviews despite no context. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm all for the memeing, Brian, but that seems kind of tasteless.
Well, and that's the thing is they used and he kind of points this out. DayZ relied a lot on mods, and it was on a whole other engine that made all these features work. When they went to
Arma.
Standalone,
That's where DayZ started.
yeah,
It was an Arma
it was the
mod.
original Arma. And so they relied on Arma's ability for grenade throwing, vehicles, all these things that were Arma built. DayZ did not build those features. And so when they turned around and released their standalone client, all the stuff that wasn't Arma, for the most part, wasn't in the game.
Yeah, none of it worked.
It took them a long time to build the basic functionality of Arma into the DayZ standalone client. These guys just don't have, you know, and maybe it was the timing of that, you know, they were able to keep going, but with the cost of living and everything, people can't work for practically nothing anymore. You know, DayZ, if the same thing would be now, DayZ may be going out of business in the same situation.
Oh
in
God,
modern day.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just don't think, I think that they're being very naive in how they're, and kind of, you know, jerks in how they're wording this, because they were no better than what we're seeing from this small development team. You know, I think that the studio, you know, they put out a working demo that I think has more features than DayZ did on their initial standalone release.
Yeah,
I you know, and the day before, people expected more, but if you compared day one of the standalone of DayZ and probably what they just released for the day before, I bet you the day before has probably better features out of the box.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
no mocking them.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's, yeah. So pretty classless from the old DayZ team, but such is life. All right, Brian, we got about 5 minutes before we roll out here. Anything else you want to cover real quick?
Yeah, so let's go ahead, jump really quickly here. I've got a couple. Let's talk here really quickly about China for a moment. Because
Okay,
China, China here, we're talking about companies shutting down. Now here, Tencent just announced their new headquarters, and it's supposed to be twice the size of Apple's headquarters. I mean, if you look, this is concept art,
What
of
the
course.
hell?
This is what they're going to be building. They're dubbing it the Vortex Incubator. That's that central area that you see, where it looks like a vortex going down.
Yeah.
That's going to be their office space. Now, how does this work? Well, when you're partnered with the government and where you're one of the only companies allowed to do business in that whole area, sure, you can make money because the government orders that you make money. But this will be interesting to see because there's been a lot of up and down with the current state of the economy in China. This is their concept. I just thought it would be interesting for people to see. This is a 500,000 square meter complex, and they're looking to accommodate over 23,000 employees in this place. And this is, Tencent. This is a video game company.
Well, they are. But I mean,
they do a lot more.
They do a lot
but they
more
do
than
the
just
brokering
video
for video games. Which is really the government requires that you go through a company like this to be able to release a game in China. And that's where the money comes from.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that's something I hadn't really seen. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't know that it'll look anything like this in the end, but yeah.
Well, hopefully it's not like some of China's other things that they build, ghost cities and buildings that are crumbling.
Well, if you look in the
falling
background,
apart.
I'm sure in that one concept, that's all empty buildings back there. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then they're also working. That Meta just penned a deal with Tencent to release VR headsets in China exclusively.
That's a smart move on Facebook. Yeah,
these are the type of things that get it to where you can get exclusivity, pretty much exclusivity rights in China by working through a company like this. Because if no one else has gotten those rights to sell VR headsets in China, that means that you're going to be the only place selling VR headsets in China, for the most part. That are allowed, not something that they've kind of hacked together and are selling. So this will be this is what has made it to where they can do that. They're going to start selling VR headsets in China in late 2024. So we should see late next year, see what kind of a product they release. But I bet you it'll probably be pretty good. And and Meta, Facebook will be the only company selling these things in the whole whole country.
There's no other VR headsets in China? That can't be right.
So Meta pens deal with Tencent to sell VR headsets in China exclusively. So I whether or not they can't have, but
there is already other VR
through whatever
headsets in
service.
China, though.
Yeah, probably through whatever service.
Yeah.
That's going to be hosting this, the Meta world that they're creating. They're going to have to use these headsets.
Interesting. All right.
We'll
Well, we will keep an eye on that. All right, Brian. Where can folks find you on the internet?
All right. Well, if you want to find me at Boise Computer on X, or you're more than welcome to go to at Brian Aldridge on all the other social media platforms. Of course, you can go to my blog, biteoftech.com, or go to our website, infectionpodcast.com. Just go to the upper right-hand side and join our server on Discord. That way, if you want to give us some show news, just toss a link to those in the show news channel, and we'll review that before the live show. If you want to play one of our 11 ARC servers, you're more than welcome to do that. Or if you just want to hang out and get a hold of Nick Arai directly through there, that's a good way to do it. If you want to watch the live show, you can do that through Twitch or YouTube, or after the show's done recording, we upload a copy of it to Rumble. Also, we upload audio-only versions for the podcast to all the different places in the lower right-hand side. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that, and we encourage you to use whatever's most convenient. If you are listening or watching on Rumble, that means at that point we've already got the show notes uploaded for that particular episode. Just click in there. There's an audio and video player built into that page, so if you want to listen or watch right there, and there's links to everything that we discussed throughout that show. And that way, if there's something you want to, we showed a lot of trailers and video today. Maybe you're listening and you want to see some of those things, just jump right into this page and you'll be able to view all those yourself. If you want to support us, there's a support menu option in the menu, or you can go to infectionpodcast.com/support.
Yes, sirree. Brian, as always, thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. We'll probably be taking a couple weeks off between Christmas and the New Year. I'll be traveling. Brian, I'm sure, will be busy with the farm he's got over there. So we'll post some updates in our Discord for that. We'll have at least one more show ahead of Christmas and probably be back in the New Year for that. So stay tuned to our Discord for all of that. If you want to find me, you can check me out on X. I'm also unbanned like Alex Jones at Nicholas M. Craig on X. My day gig, it's the Wilmington's Morning News Podcast. You can find it in all your favorite podcast apps or visit my website, nickcraig.com. If you missed any portion of today's show, maybe you'd like to check out the trailer from 3 years ago on the day before, you can head on over to our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.